military base in Colorado. But when they refused her entry, she pulled out a card that hadn't seen daylight in over a decade. The moment base commander Colonel James Martinez saw it, he dropped everything he was doing and ordered every soldier to attention. The entire base fell silent. From which city around the world are you watching today? If this story moves you, please subscribe to Rising Life Stories to help us share more stories of hidden heroes. But that faded card wasn't just any military identification. It was a Medal of Honor citation card, the rarest document in the American military. Rebecca Thompson had earned it in Afghanistan when she single-handedly saved an entire platoon from an ambush, taking 3 bullets in the process. The card was so weathered because she'd carried it through 2 years of captivity in enemy hands, using it as her only reminder of who she was when everything else had been stripped away. The base commander, Colonel Martinez, recognized her immediately, not from her appearance, which had changed drastically since her rescue, but from the stories that had become legend among military personnel. What he didn't know was why Medal of Honor recipient Rebecca Thompson was standing at his gate in civilian clothes, looking like she hadn't slept in days, asking for something that could either save lives or destroy careers forever. The Colorado morning sun cast long shadows across the entrance to Fort Carson as Rebecca Thompson approached the main gate. At 35, she looked tired in a way that went deeper than a few sleepless nights. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes that had seen better days: faded jeans, a worn leather jacket, and boots that suggested someone who spent more time walking than driving. Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez had been working gate security at Fort Carson for 8 years, and he'd developed a keen eye for distinguishing between routine visitors and potential problems. The woman approaching his checkpoint didn't fit neatly into either category. She walked with purpose but seemed hesitant, confident but somehow vulnerable. "Good morning, ma'am," Rodriguez said as Rebecca approached the security window. "Can I see your ID and the purpose of your visit?" Rebecca handed over a standard Colorado driver's license. "Rebecca Thompson," she said simply. "I need to speak with Colonel Martinez." Rodriguez glanced at the license, then back at Rebecca. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am? The base commander doesn't typically see walk-in visitors." "No appointment," Rebecca replied, "but he'll want to see me." There was something in her tone that made Rodriguez pause. It wasn't arrogance or entitlement. It was the quiet certainty of someone who knew things that others didn't. But protocol was protocol. "Ma'am, I'm going to need more information. What's the nature of your business with Colonel Martinez?" Rebecca looked past Rodriguez toward the base beyond. Fort Carson stretched out before her, thousands of acres housing some of the Army's most elite units. She could see soldiers conducting PT in the distance, vehicles moving between buildings, the familiar rhythm of military life that had once been her entire world. "It's about Captain David Chen," she said finally, "about what happened in Kandahar." Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but he made a note on his clipboard. "Ma'am, I'll need to call this in. Can you wait here, please?" As Rodriguez picked up his phone, Rebecca stepped back from the window and tried to calm the anxiety that had been building for days. She hadn't been on a military base in 3 years, not since the ceremony at the White House where she'd received the Medal of Honor from the president himself. The crowds, the cameras, the speeches about heroism and sacrifice, it had all felt surreal, disconnected from the reality of what had actually happened in that valley in Afghanistan. After the ceremony, Rebecca had tried to build a civilian life. She'd moved to a small town outside Denver, taken a job as a park ranger, and attempted to find peace in the quiet routines of normal existence. But some ghosts refused to stay buried. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out, "I've spoken with the colonel's aide. He says Colonel Martinez doesn't have any meetings scheduled regarding Captain Chen or Kandahar operations." Rebecca had expected this response. The events she needed to discuss weren't the kind that appeared on official schedules or in routine briefings. They belonged to the classified world of special operations, where the most important conversations happened in secure rooms far from public view. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said, reading his name tape, "please tell Colonel Martinez that Rebecca Thompson is here. Tell him I have information about Operation Iron Eagle that requires immediate attention." Rodriguez hesitated, Operation Iron Eagle wasn't a designation he recognized, but the way Rebecca spoke suggested it was significant. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while I make another call." 20 minutes later, a junior officer appeared at the gate. Lieutenant Sarah Williams looked fresh out of West Point, with the eager efficiency of someone still proving herself in her first assignment. "Ms. Thompson," Williams said, consulting her clipboard. "I'm Lieutenant Williams, Colonel Martinez's aide. The colonel has reviewed your request, and unfortunately, he's not available for unscheduled meetings today. If you'd like to submit a formal request through proper channels—" "Lieutenant," Rebecca interrupted gently, "how long have you been at Fort Carson?" "6 months, ma'am," Williams replied, slightly confused by the question. "Then you wouldn't remember the ceremony 3 years ago, the medal presentation. But Colonel Martinez will—" Williams consulted her notes again. "Ma'am, I don't see any record of a medal ceremony involving you and Colonel Martinez. Perhaps you're thinking of a different base." Rebecca almost smiled. In the military bureaucracy, individual heroism often got lost in paperwork and protocol. To Lieutenant Williams, she was just another civilian making claims that couldn't be verified through official channels. "Lieutenant Williams," Rebecca said, "please go back to Colonel Martinez. Tell him that the Medal of Honor recipient from the Kandahar incident needs 5 minutes of his time. Tell him it's about Captain Chen's final transmission." Williams looked uncertain. "Ma'am, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Medal of Honor recipients are, well, they're usually accompanied by military liaisons. They don't typically show up alone at base gates." Rebecca understood the lieutenant's skepticism. Medal of Honor recipients were rare. Fewer than 3,500 had been awarded since the medal's creation. Recipients were treated with extraordinary respect and usually traveled with appropriate escort and ceremony. A lone woman in civilian clothes didn't fit the expected profile. "I understand your position, Lieutenant," Rebecca said, "but some situations require discretion rather than ceremony." Williams returned to the base, leaving Rebecca waiting at the gate with Sergeant Rodriguez, who was beginning to show signs of curiosity about the unusual visitor who seemed to know more about military protocol than most civilians. 30 minutes later, Williams returned with a more senior officer. Major Robert Kim carried himself with the bearing of someone who had seen combat, and his expression suggested he was taking this situation more seriously than his junior colleague. "Ms. Thompson," Major Kim said, "I'm Major Kim, Base Security Chief. I've spoken with Colonel Martinez, and he's asked me to handle this matter. He says he has no knowledge of any Medal of Honor recipient named Rebecca Thompson, and no record of any ongoing issues related to Operation Iron Eagle or Captain Chen." Rebecca had expected this response as well. The events surrounding her Medal of Honor were classified at the highest levels. Even within the military, only a select few knew the full details of what had happened in that Afghan valley. "Major Kim," Rebecca said, "I understand the colonel's position, but I have information that affects the safety of current operations, information that I can only share with him directly. Ma'am, if you have intelligence regarding current operations, there are proper channels for that information. I can arrange for you to speak with the appropriate intelligence officers." Rebecca shook her head. "Major, the information I have isn't going through intelligence channels. It's going directly to Colonel Martinez, or it's not going anywhere at all." The standoff stretched for several more minutes. Rebecca could see Major Kim weighing his options, trying to determine whether she was a legitimate concern or simply a persistent civilian with delusions of importance. Finally, Major Kim made his decision. "Ms. Thompson, I'm going to have to ask you to leave base property. If you continue to request meetings without proper authorization, we'll have to consider this trespassing." Rebecca looked at Major Kim for a long moment, then at Lieutenant Williams, then at Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. For 3 years, she had successfully avoided drawing attention to her Medal of Honor status. She preferred anonymity to the awkward gratitude and uncomfortable questions that came with recognition. But Captain Chen's message had changed everything. The encrypted communication she'd received a week ago had contained information that could save lives or cost them, depending on how quickly she could get it to the right people. "Major Kim," Rebecca said quietly, "before I leave, I want to show you something." She reached into the inner pocket of her leather jacket and withdrew a small, rectangular piece of paper. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an old business card or maybe a library checkout slip. The paper was yellowed with age, the edges worn soft from years of handling. The text was faded to the point where it was barely legible. But as Rebecca handed the card to Major Kim, Sergeant Rodriguez caught a glimpse of the official seal at the top, the distinctive eagle and shield that appeared on only the most important military documents. Major Kim took the card and studied it carefully. As his eyes focused on the faded text, his expression began to change. The official skepticism gave way to something approaching shock. "Lieutenant Williams," he said quietly, "please call Colonel Martinez immediately. Tell him we have a code gold situation at the main gate." Williams looked confused. "Sir, what's code gold?" "Just make the call, Lieutenant." "Now." As Williams hurried away, Major Kim continued to examine the card. The document was a Medal of Honor citation summary, a condensed version of the official recommendation that recipients were given along with their medal. It contained the basic details of the action that had earned the award, location, date, and a brief description of the heroic conduct. This particular card told the story of Staff Sergeant Rebecca Thompson, who on October 15, 2019, in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, had single-handedly engaged a force of over 30 enemy combatants to protect her wounded platoon members, allowing for their successful evacuation while sustaining multiple gunshot wounds in the process. "Ma'am," Major Kim said, his tone completely changed. "I owe you an apology. I had no idea." "Major," Rebecca interrupted, "you were doing your job. Security protocol exists for good reasons. But now that you know who I am, I need to speak with Colonel Martinez immediately." Within minutes, the atmosphere at the gate had transformed completely. Word of a Medal of Honor recipient's presence had spread quickly through the base communications network. Soldiers who had been going about their routine duties were now gathering at respectful distances, trying to catch a glimpse of one of the military's most honored heroes. Colonel James Martinez arrived at the gate in his official vehicle, accompanied by his senior staff. At 52, Martinez was a career officer who had commanded troops in multiple combat deployments. He had enormous respect for those who had earned the Medal of Honor, and he was visibly embarrassed that a recipient had been kept waiting at his gate. "Sergeant Thompson," he said as he approached, "I apologize for the confusion. If I had known—" "It's Rebecca now, Colonel," she said, shaking his hand, "and there's no need to apologize. I prefer to avoid attention when possible." Martinez nodded, understanding immediately. Many Medal of Honor recipients struggled with the public attention that came with their recognition. "How can I help you, Rebecca?" "Colonel, I need to speak with you privately about Captain David Chen, about his final transmission before he was killed." Martinez's expression grew serious. Captain Chen's death 6 months ago had been a significant loss for the base. Chen had been leading a classified mission when his unit was ambushed. Only 2 members of his team had survived. "Rebecca, that operation is still classified. I'm not sure what you think you know about Captain Chen's final transmission, but..." Rebecca reached into her jacket again and withdrew a small digital device. "Colonel, I know about it because I received it. Chen didn't send his final message to his commanding officer. He sent it to me." Colonel Martinez stared at the device in Rebecca's hand. The implications of what she was saying were staggering. Captain Chen's final transmission had been one of the most puzzling aspects of his death. Intelligence officers had assumed that his communications equipment had been damaged in the ambush, preventing him from sending a proper situational report to his command structure. "Rebecca," Martinez said carefully, "why would Captain Chen send his final message to you rather than to his chain of command?" "Because," Rebecca replied, "Chen knew something that he couldn't trust to normal channels, something about the mission that got him killed." Martinez looked around at the gathering crowd of soldiers and staff officers. This conversation was rapidly moving beyond what could be discussed in public. "Let's continue this in my office," he said. "Major Kim, please escort Ms. Thompson to headquarters and clear my schedule for the next hour." As they walked toward Martinez's office, Rebecca explained the connection between herself and Captain Chen. They had served together briefly in Afghanistan before Rebecca's Medal of Honor action. Chen had been a junior officer then, but he had impressed Rebecca with his intelligence and integrity. After I received the Medal of Honor, Rebecca said, Chen reached out to me. He said that if he ever encountered a situation where he couldn't trust his normal reporting channels, he would contact me directly. He knew that Medal of Honor recipients have direct access to senior leadership if necessary. In Martinez's office, Rebecca activated the device and played Chen's final transmission. The message was brief but chilling. Chen reported that his mission had been compromised from within. Someone in the command structure had leaked details of the operation to enemy forces. He couldn't identify the source of the leak, but he had evidence that proved the betrayal had come from inside Fort Carson. Chen died because someone wanted him silenced, Rebecca concluded, and that someone is still here, still in a position to compromise future operations. Martinez listened to the recording twice, his expression growing darker with each replay. Rebecca, do you have any idea who might have been responsible for this leak? Chen mentions a code name in the transmission, Raven. He says Raven has been feeding information to enemy forces for at least 6 months. Chen had been tracking communications patterns and financial records. Where's Chen's evidence? Rebecca handed Martinez an encrypted drive. Everything Chen discovered is on here. Financial records, communication logs, travel patterns. He was building a case against Raven when he was killed. Martinez plugged the drive into his secure computer and began reviewing the files. What he saw confirmed Rebecca's story and revealed a pattern of betrayal that went deeper than anyone had suspected. The investigation that followed Rebecca's revelation moved quickly. Within 48 hours, military intelligence had confirmed Chen's findings and identified Raven as Major Patricia Wells, a logistics officer who had been selling operational details to enemy contacts. Wells was arrested quietly, her betrayal exposed through the evidence that Captain Chen had died trying to deliver. The investigation revealed that Chen's mission had been deliberately compromised to prevent him from completing his investigation. 3 days later, Colonel Martinez organized a small ceremony to honor both Captain Chen's sacrifice and Rebecca's role in exposing the truth. Captain Chen died protecting his fellow soldiers, Martinez said during the ceremony. His final act was ensuring that his investigation would continue through Medal of Honor recipient Rebecca Thompson. Rebecca accepted the recognition reluctantly. Captain Chen was the real hero here, she said. He risked everything to protect soldiers he would never meet. I just delivered his message. After the ceremony, Martinez walked Rebecca to the gate where her journey had begun. The same guards who had initially turned her away now stood at attention as she passed. Rebecca, Martinez said, Chen's sacrifice has prevented future casualties. The intelligence Wells was selling would have compromised dozens of operations. Colonel, Rebecca replied, heroes shouldn't have to die to expose traitors. We need to do better. Captain David Chen was posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his courage in exposing the security breach that cost him his life. Rebecca Thompson returned to her quiet civilian life, but maintained the secure communication system Chen had established for soldiers who needed absolute trust. At Rising Life Stories, we believe that true heroism often works in shadows. Rebecca's Medal of Honor had been earned in combat, but her greatest service came in ensuring a fallen soldier's final message reached those who could act on it. Sometimes the most faded documents carry the most important truths. Where in the world are you watching today? If this story moved you, please subscribe, because there are heroes among us whose service continues long after their wars have ended.